listening to me. I hope that our recommendations can launch us off into a process of building community, because we can't have class divisions or class warfare or racial divisions or racial warfare keep us from meeting this challenge. We can't do it in isolation from one another. So we have to create a culture where everybody thrives. So, thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
So Chair, council members, at this time, I want to thank you for your time and ask if you have any questions.
I don't see any questions, actually. Okay, Councilmember Bender has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is really kind of back to the bigger presentation that you had given about the work. So first of all, this is really exciting, and I'm thankful for your time and all of the community time that went into this. I wondered, Councilmember Fry and I aren't as involved in the kind of day-to-day planning. We were chatting as you were talking, that there's a lot of stuff here, things about housing and job training and things that we're working on kind of throughout the city enterprise. So I wanted to check in about a couple things. One was kind of how this work is integrating to those bigger picture work products that we're doing in other departments citywide. And then the second was just in terms of your own capacity within the office to have these two pilot areas and what might be needed to support that work to make sure that it's successful. Because again, it does have that intensive community engagement piece that I know is time intensive and staff intensive.
Thank you, Chair, Councilmember Bender. I will address the second question first. So in terms of staff capacity, you mentioned the intensity of the engagement process over the past year since the work group started meeting. I would say the Green Zones initiative took at least 50 to 75% of my time, meeting with people one-on-one, holding the work group meetings monthly, planning for the data collection and analysis and all of that. So it is very time intensive. To be able to do a single pilot that would take a significant portion of a single person's time, more time than to be able to do two. So we would definitely need more than one staff person to be able to do two separate green zones. To the first question that you asked around sort of the citywide initiatives, throughout this process with the work group, we had half of the members being city staff that we engaged who are working many on citywide initiatives, whether they're programs or policies. And so brought them into the conversation around what does this look like when you target resources or initiatives in specific areas? Is there any change to the initiative itself, or just does it become targeted outreach and engagement with those communities specifically? There can also be options where we provide enhanced incentives for businesses or homes in those areas. So these conversations have begun and will continue to develop as the specific designation areas are identified.
Thank you. So I imagine that was the case with the second piece. I know that the Sustainability Office has great relationships with CPED and NCR and the other kind of relevant departments, health. But I guess I am a little concerned about that first piece, just again, knowing that we have the resources available that will be required to do the work successfully. So if that's unresolved, I guess I just kind of ask for more clarification, either from you or from the authors, about the staff time piece. Thanks.
And I'm happy to clarify too, especially as we get into the discussion here a little bit about what my thinking on it was in the discussions I've had with other staff and communications. But I think Councilmember Cano has a question or a comment for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Kelly, thank you so much for all the work that you've put into this project. And I personally attended the session at Mercado Central where you led the listening session in Spanish, and I was really impressed with the amount of energy and commitment that you put forward that day. We had probably 20 Latino folks attend, so that was really helpful. And then to all the different groups that have been supporting this work as well, it's been really amazing to see how something on paper turns into a real initiative with folks engaged and and moving forward. I just wanted to mention kind of two things that we've discussed, that I personally have discussed with community residents who are really involved with this initiative and have been working on it for years. And one thing was around the piece of gentrification. And so while affordable housing is an important conversation of the anti-gentrification work, what I would like to encourage us as a city and as council members to think about is the ecosystem in which gentrification thrives, which involves housing, but also business development, and then also the public space realm. And so I know that people are looking forward to having an anti-gentrification conversation in relationship to green zones, where we're talking about long-term affordable housing options that are perpetual in terms of how the city of Minneapolis really sustains that and protects that long-term, not just through the first generation of homeowners or folks who are investing in a neighborhood, but just long-term protecting that economic diversity in those neighborhoods. And then that also connects to a conversation around commercial land trusts around businesses and making sure that those businesses remain accessible and affordable to the local small business owners who, are not as likely to be able to compete with large investors in the free market. And then you have the conversation about the public realm or the public spaces that has to do with the parks and the culture of welcomeness and inclusivity in a neighborhood, whether or not you have a laundromat or if the new development takes out the laundromat. And what does that mean for the ecosystem of where low-income residents and renters can live and feel comfortable in? So I just kind of wanted to put that on our radar in terms of how we can speak about gentrification in a more robust and dynamic manner that goes above and beyond the affordable housing component. And then I just wanted to acknowledge and give you all credit for the fact that you, in the work that we're going to be approving today, you talk about making sure that this green zones vision and work is picked up by all the other departments throughout our enterprise to ensure that we're aligning and leveraging all the different conversations that are happening throughout our city to ensure that we are building on each other's work and vision and not be so isolated. And so it's kind of similar to what Councilmember Kim Gordon did by pulling together the different commissions under the HESA committee, that we can do something similar with that. And I just thought that was a really good point that you all as staff brought forward to the council in terms of how can we work with different departments and their business plans to ensure that they are supporting and aware of the green zones conversation, which is unique. It's very new for us as a city. And once again, I think it's one of the ways that the city of Minneapolis is leading nationally on issues of environmental justice, racial equity, and sustainability. So I can't thank you all enough for the work that has happened under this banner, and really want to just actually acknowledge all the different community members who have put in a lot of volunteer time, expertise, and personal passion and commitment to ensure that this kind of work developed. And then, just a nod to the council members who approved the climate plans before we came in as council members, where that was approved as a direction that really laid the foundations for this kind of work to bloom and come to fruition. So it's been a nice passing of the baton here as we're getting ready to look forward to the next 10 to 20 years as a city, building something more sustainable and more environmentally just for everyone. So thanks.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to comment on that, but you don't have to. Appreciate that and appreciate all the work and effort that went into it on your part and everybody's part. Really appreciated Louis putting some perspective on that too. I think it's easy to get all caught up in the metrics, which block is this going to include and which isn't, and all that. And it's actually a much bigger thing that we're trying to deal with here. And even if we're stuck in some of the minutia, there's a bigger reason, and it's good to be reminded of that. So thanks so much. Did you want to make it one more comment?
I just wanted to add that it was not an easy process because of just the mix of people there and the different perspectives. But what I noticed about Kelly was that she had the substance or ability to sit in the fire through some really difficult conversations and stayed grounded and was able to pull together, the spectrum of our thoughts into, I think, a pretty beautiful piece that we can launch from.
Well, thank you for adding that. Really appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is just walk through the, oh, is there?
Yeah, could I interrupt?
Of
We
course.
had one more of our work group members join us, if she would be able to take a couple minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, Yolanda, if you'd like.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for my tardiness. I had a lost child. So,
Hope everything's okay.
I guess I just want to piggyback on what Louis had to say. My participation with this committee was quite humbling, informative, and also I think that it was sobering to understand. I've done this kind of work for 30 years in Minneapolis. And one of the most compelling components that I believe that we all experience, and I continue to have conversation around reminders and an opportunity with Kelly and the rest of my committee members, is these are not just blocks or lines and barriers or boundaries within the city. We're talking about real people and real lives. And the impact that health disparities has that correlates with the intentionality around environmental justice is pretty pervasive. And we understand that the same communities over time with intentionality have again and again been impacted. And so with that being said, if we know that something is broken and politely sanitizing those issues does not eradicate it, we need to be able to have those intentional conversations. We have an elephant in the room, and I agree with my colleague that Kelly she allowed herself to be transparent and to also be a student to this work. And it was very painful for all of us. And it was not, we want to thank you that this was not an easy process. There were often times we went away shaking our head, but came back with the courage to not be able to have closure and continue with every meeting. Yet health disparities, children's lives, seniors' lives, and other constituents within Minneapolis that are most vulnerable continue to be impacted in a very severe way. And that looks like health disparities. When we have housing that is substandard, we have lead, we have poor water, poor plumbing, all those kinds of things with working people that are working from paycheck to paycheck, and they have substandard housing and they become ill, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to be a vicious cycle. And we really want you to know that the Green Zone Initiative it's not the answer, but it is definitely a preventative beginning. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. So now maybe we'll proceed to the resolution, and it was good to hear those details and the amount of work that went into this, because one of the things I wanted to do with the resolution was take the work of the work group and the task force and codify it and bring it to the council for approval. So but the bulk of the resolution is taking words, some of them right out of the presentation, certainly identifying those 6 goals, also with that core issue about equity and gentrification held up, and to bring that forward. One of the things too, and especially if you look at the last map that I was trying to accomplish with the resolution, was acknowledge the truth that there are actually two areas that certainly have to be designated and noted. This is that equity plus environment map, which we could try putting that up, but unfortunately, I don't have a side-by-side then to show the map that I used to create off of that. But clearly, this map demonstrates that there's a northern area and there's a southern area that where the equity and environmental issues match. And so now if we can go to the overhead, and I'm not sure how to turn that on, but I think other people know just what to do. I use that as the basis for this map and certainly worked with staff and also worked with other council members. So I had the opportunity to meet with council members from the 4th Ward, the 1st Ward, the 6th Ward, the 9th Ward, talk to staff from the 3rd Ward office. And I just want to call some differences in the northern zone, which is outlined by a green line. In the map that the group provided us, the river created a boundary, but also if you looked at some of the notes in the presentation, it talked about the industry on the other side of the river. And so it became clear that really what we want to do is, or what I thought we would want to do is extend that over a little bit into northeast. So it moves that line over that will include both sides of the river. There's a River First initiative going on. There's lots of efforts that are seeing this as a unified group to work on, and the park board's very involved in this, so it made sense. And the south side, actually, the dark red area, or the 90 percentile, got cut a little bit short. There's some area that if you look at your presentation, you'll see it actually extended and lifted up into the university in Seven Corners and across Riverside Avenue, which is right in my neck of the woods. And it seemed that making that dividing point at Riverside Avenue made a lot of sense, because most of the things north of Riverside Avenue is the University of Minnesota area, and we can certainly work on all of those and address some of those issues going forward. But this gave it a little bit of a smaller area. And then we identified two pilot zones, and I will admit that this wasn't the preferred idea of staff, partly because of the resources and what could be done, but it seemed that I wanted to at least identify those pilot zones, and what the resolution calls out is trying to start on both of them at the same time. And the first one includes the McKinley and Hawthorne neighborhood on the north side, and Ventura Village and East Phillips on the south, but also that little bit of northeast. The part on the resolution that kind of distinguishes how to move forward on these pilots might be something that council members want to pay attention to. One of the, what's called out in the original resolution that started this whole process is, once we've identified a green zone, we're going to go through an open appointments process to get a stakeholders group together to start to develop the work plan. And that's essentially what's proposed. It's on the bottom of the second page in the resolve clause having to do with the Southern Green Zone Pilot Specific Task Force. And we're also directing the city coordinators' offices of sustainability and equity and inclusion to establish and focus their work on the southern side. Then on the next page, there's another paragraph, third from the last paragraph of the resolution, which talks about the northern green zone pilot specific group. And this is something that will be put together by the coordinator's office, but also the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department and the Health Department. There's some recognition, I think, among many of us that there's already a number of departments that are very involved and are working in this part of the city. There's recently been a lot of discussion even about Northern Metals and some mitigation funding. There's opportunities up there. There's already resources that are focusing on that. And if we could convene maybe first the staff group, maybe with some stakeholders, to start to look at what would a work plan look like, how could we start moving forward with that. This would be short of doing the open appointments process and convening a stakeholders group. Because one of the reasons why we're even able to do that in the southern area is because there's a pending grant out there, and we're anticipating getting some additional resources and a consultant to come in and help with that. Well, maybe there's some grant opportunities, maybe there's some partnerships that could help us also do that in the northern pilot. So that's kind of the hope with this. Quite honestly, it seemed like we'd be dishonest with ourselves, and we would be unfair, I think that it would be unreasonable not to say that we have the capacity to start work developing plans for both of these, when the fact of the matter is, to really implement these green zones and even the pilot zones, we're probably talking about something in the 2018 budget as well. So we need to get some information and some ideas back moving forward now. And my hope is that this resolution will allow us to do that, that it's honest and realistic, even if it's maybe stretching us a little bit thin. I did have the opportunity also to run the idea by several staff people in the health department and also in the coordinator's office and in neighborhood community relations department, and they all seem up to the task and maybe even a little bit excited about trying to get to work on both of these pilots. Okay, maybe I put words in their mouth, but I got some smiles out of them anyway. I don't know if there's other questions or issues people want to raise, but that's my explanation of what's before you. I'm not going to read it all. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reiterate, I think this is really good work, and I'm really supportive. I do think it's important always, as policymakers, to ensure that we do have the adequate staff time and support needed for our staff when we ask them to do new large work products. So I do think I do want to keep following up. I know that you've had the conversations, but just with the coordinator's office and especially with Ms. Press leaving soon, just to make sure that we just kind of all understand what's the kind of overall work program of the sustainability office and how this fits in with all of that. So, but I appreciate the explanation a lot. Thank you.
I will say that the report back is within 6 months. So part of it, what I was concerned about is maybe we want to get an update sooner, and we can certainly have that. But it seems like there's one ready, particularly perhaps with looking at the northern pilot, that will need an update if there's a first meeting or two and it's really clear if we had these three things, we could go forward. But I'm happy leaving it at within 6 months, the way those things go. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did, now that you mentioned that, I did want to ask just clarity from Kelly or other staff members. What is your anticipated start time? Because I know it's 6 months from the time the task force gets seated. And so I'm just curious about like where are we at in the open appointments process, and when do you expect the work group to kind of have their first initial meeting?
Thank you, Chair and Councilmember Cano. So to give an example, last year when the council approved the work group resolution in February, we were able to pull together the work group members through an application process and a more informal committee approval process and establish the first meeting by the end of April. So I would anticipate it would probably be another 1 to 2 months.
From kind of today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe even from next Friday when we get full council approval.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 1 to 2 months from that time. Okay. And then I just wanted to let you know that I'm more than happy to work with you to find resources for this work. I think it's really important that both South Minneapolis and North Minneapolis are equipped to take this on. And so I've been reaching out to contacts in the foundation world to let them know about this work. And there's really, people are excited. You know, they know that this is really great work. And so they're trying to figure out ways to do some discretionary funding to help ensure that we can have, you know, the support that we need. So I'm ready.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I don't see any then, so I will move we have, I guess, 2 actions. We want to receive and file the report and presentation, and also pass the resolution. I'll just move both items together. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Those motions carry. And I think we've finished all the work for today. Thank you, everybody. You're all welcome back in a couple weeks for our next meeting. This meeting is adjourned.